this time, congratulate and thank Kimmel Mechanical with your applause. I would appreciate that. And now at this time, I welcome to the stage the President of our National Honor Society, Mr. Isaac Anthony, to introduce our special guest.
Our special guest today is Captain Michael Foreman. He is a former astronaut that retired from NASA Johnson Space Center in 2015. He is also a U.S. Naval Aviator, retired with the rank of captain. Captain Foreman holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Aerospace Engineering from the United States Naval Academy and the Master's in Science degree in Aeronautical Engineering from the U.S. Naval Postgraduate School. In addition, he is also a graduate of the U.S. Naval Test Pilot School. He was selected as a NASA astronaut in 1998. His two space missions were STS-123 aboard Space Shuttle Endeavour and in 2008, and then again in 2009 on STS-129 aboard Space Shuttle Atlantis. Our speaker has accumulated over more than 26 days in space while conducting 5 spacewalks totaling over 123 hours. During his final 3 years at NASA, he has served as a safety branch chief in the astronaut office. Join us in welcoming from Houston, Texas. Let's give a warm Wildcat welcome to Captain Mike Foreman.
I'm on. Thank you. Thank you so much, Stephen. Let me start the clock here so we can keep track of time. First off, Dr. Brackett, would you come back out real quick? Did he leave? I want to present something to him. He ran off. I thought he was going to escape, but before you run off, I brought you something to remember me by. It's a picture of me. It's for your dartboard here at the school. It says to the students and teachers at Har-Ber High School, dream big. Sign my name. I put my mission numbers down there and today's date. So thank you so much for inviting me. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. So yeah, it is great to be here. I am so thrilled to have a chance to talk to all of you. And what an impressive school you guys have. You guys must be very proud. I drove up this morning following Mr. Klaus, and Mr. Klaus, I want to thank you too for doing all the work to get me down here, get me up here from Houston, I guess. Drove up. Wow, what an impressive building you guys have. This has got to be a thrill. I went to an old rundown high school in Wadsworth, Ohio, and little town, a little bit like here, because Wadsworth, Ohio is really surrounded by a lot of farms and things like that. But it was just a one high school town and a little bit run down. Now they've rebuilt it, but it's a little nicer now. But back when I was there, not so nice. So what I was going to do today is talk to you for a little bit. First, though, I think because there might be somebody in the audience that says, what is an astronaut exactly? What does an astronaut do, And so I like to start off and talking to you about one of my space shuttle missions. I was on 2 space shuttle missions. STS-129 was my second mission. And one of the cool things, I'm going to grab a laser pointer here, see if one of these works a little bit. One of the cool things about getting to be an astronaut and go to space is when you get assigned to a mission, you get to design your own mission patch. So that's kind of cool. Astronauts get to design. Now, none of us really have any talent in that area, designing mission patches. So we get a lot of outside help. But this is the patch that my crewmates and I designed for STS-129. And I don't know if you can see my laser pointer. Maybe, Stephen, if you bring the lights down a little bit, maybe. Especially these ones in my face, but maybe you can't take those down. I don't know, for TV. You see our mission patch here, STS-129. Thing astronauts like to see on their mission patch is their name, because that kind of means, hey, you're getting to go to space, which is kind of cool. So this is our mission patch. Let's see, Mr. Sherman, could you give me the next slide? Great. So this is our motley crew. This is the 6 astronauts that I flew to space with. Now, some of you might realize that, hey, a space shuttle could actually carry 7 astronauts. Why did you only have 6 people on your mission? And the reason is because we had an empty seat going to the space station so that we could bring Nicole Stott back with us. So Nicole Stott flew up on STS-128, you know, the shuttle mission before ours, about 3 months before ours. She spent about 100 days on the space station, and we were her ride home. So she's not an official member of our crew because she didn't launch with us, but you're going to see a picture of her, and you're going to see her in the video here. So what I'm doing right now is I'm going to talk to you about all these folks on my crew so that when the video, which I'm about to play from my mission, is going and I'm talking about it, you'll understand, you know, who are the people that you're looking at, and you'll know a little bit about them. So every time I look at this crew photo, though, I laugh because on this mission, STS-129, there were 6 astronauts. 3 of us had gone to space before, and 3 this was their first mission. So on this side, on the left side, let me see if my pointer, can you see that red dot at all? A little bit? The 3 of us over here, we had all gone to space before, at least once before. And the 3 people over here on this right side, these are all the brand new, I hate to use the word rookies because these guys were highly trained. They were ready to go do this mission. They had been astronauts for at least 5, 6 years before they flew this mission. So I didn't feel like, you know, it's correct to call them rookies, but they were our first timers. And I get a chuckle out of looking at this photo because it's kind of like, and we didn't purposely do this, but it's kind of like the 3 of us on this side, we said, oh, rookies, and we took a step to the side, you know. It's kind of what it looks like. You guys are allowed to laugh, right? Yeah, okay, good, okay. I think I'm funny, yeah, haha. I think I'm funny, so if you hear something funny, you know, feel free to laugh. That wasn't meant to be funny, no. Okay, next slide, Mr. Sherman. This is our commander. This is a guy named Charlie Hobaugh. He's a Marine colonel, fighter pilot. His nickname is Scorch. You know, in space shuttle days, we didn't have a pilot and a co-pilot. We didn't have a captain and a first officer. We had a commander and a pilot. So Scorch is our commander. Give me the next slide. This guy, Captain Barry Wilmore, another Navy captain, call sign Butch, he was our pilot. So think of it this way. Go back a slide, Mr. Sherman. Scorch, our commander, is the guy flying the space shuttle, okay? He's our commander. He's the guy who actually flies the space shuttle. Next slide. Butch, our pilot, is the guy that comes along, and at the end of the mission, he pushes the button to make the wheels come down so we can land. Yeah. So I had breakfast with Butch, you know, good friend of mine, Butch Wilmore. I had breakfast with him about 2 months ago. And we were having breakfast, and I said to Butch, Butch, I kind of feel a little bad. He said, why do you feel bad? I said, well, every time I do a presentation about our mission, I kind of poke fun at you because I say, we brought you along just to push the button to make the wheels come down. He looked at me and said, Mike, it's 2 buttons. I said, well, that explains why it took a year to train you. So, yeah. So anyway, that's our commander, pilot. Actually, I kid Butch a lot, but you'll see him a lot in the video because he's very involved. He's involved in a lot of different things during this mission. You'll see him a lot. Okay, next slide, Mr. Sherman. That's me. You're going to know way too much about me by the end of this, so I'm not going to. I'll tell you my life story here after the video, but that's a picture of me upside down, floating. Next slide. This is Leland Melvin. So Leland Melvin has a very interesting story. Leland Melvin, we're actually astronaut classmates. We came to NASA together in 1998 to join NASA. Leland's from Virginia, and he's a very smart guy. He went to college. He went to the University of Richmond, and he studied chemistry. Like I said, very smart guy, studied chemistry. He also played football for the Richmond Spiders. He was such a good wide receiver, he got drafted by the NFL after college to go play in the pros. I guess the Detroit Lions is a professional team. That's what they tell me. Anyway, nobody from Detroit here, so it's okay to poke fun at Detroit. Okay, so he went to Detroit to play for the Detroit Lions, and he got injured, unfortunately. So he left the Detroit Lions. He got picked up by the Dallas Cowboys, played for them for a little while, and got re-injured again. And at that point, they said, Leland, we think you're going to have chronic hamstring issues. We don't see you having a long career in the NFL. You should probably think of working somewhere else. He said, oh, okay, I got this chemistry degree. I think I'd like to be a scientist at NASA. So he went back, and NASA actually has a research facility in Langley, Virginia. So he went back to Langley, got a job, and he worked there for about 8 years. After working there for about 8 years, he heard about this astronaut program thing, and so he put an application in to be an astronaut. Meanwhile, me, growing up in Ohio, always wanting to be an astronaut, I had applied to NASA 8 times, okay? 8 times. The 8th time was in 1997, and I got interviewed. I got called for an interview, and who did I meet in my interview group? The same group that I was interviewing to be an astronaut? Leland Melvin. Leland Melvin there on his first time, me after applying 8 times. So we both got selected, but I don't like Leland too well, because Leland didn't have to struggle, you know, to get selected like I did. He didn't have to persevere. So anyway, that's a joke too, but I like Leland. I like Leland very well. He's a good guy. You'll see him in the video. Next slide, Mr. Sherman. Okay, this is Randy Bresnik, another Marine colonel, fighter pilot. Randy was actually hired by NASA to be a shuttle pilot astronaut. Meaning he was getting that training to push the button to make the wheels come down. He could have done what Butch did on this mission, but early in his career, training career at NASA, we gave him spacewalk training, and he did so well at the spacewalk training, we said, hey, we need to use this guy as a spacewalker on one of these missions. If we put him on a mission as a pilot, a shuttle pilot, so he can push that button, we won't let him do a spacewalk. We didn't let our commander or a pilot during a space shuttle mission do a spacewalk, so we would lose that talent, obvious talent that he's displayed in training. So we put him on this mission as a mission specialist, and he did a couple of spacewalks. He did a great job. Now, right now, today, where is Randy Bresnik? Randy Bresnik is now, today, the commander of the International Space Station. He's back in space. He's been in space since about July. He comes back home next month, and so he's been in space for about 5 months on his second time to space, and he's up there right now today going around the Earth every 90 minutes, and so that's pretty cool that Randy Bresnik, and we call him Comrade, you know, Comrade Bresnik. Okay, next slide, Mr. Sherman. Bobby Satcher. This guy, save this guy for last on our shuttle crew at least, because Dr. Bobby Satcher, he's a medical doctor, smarter than the other 5 of us on this crew put together, I can tell you. Very smart guy. When I first met Bobby Satcher, he had been selected in 2004 with Randy, same astronaut class, and we had a training session together. We had a few minutes to chat, and I knew he was a medical doctor, so I asked him, well, Bobby, where did you go for your undergraduate degree? And he said, well, I went to MIT. And I said, wow, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, that's one of the top engineering, hard sciences universities in this country. I don't think of medical doctors as going to get a degree from MIT before they go to medical school, you know? I think of a medical doctor as a guy or a gal that thinks, I'll go here, get a biology degree, then I'll apply to med school. Well, he said, my undergraduate degree is in chemical engineering. I said, oh, okay, you are smarter than me. He did not tell me that day that he actually has a PhD in chemical engineering from MIT. So here's what happened. He graduated with an undergraduate degree in chemical engineering, and he applied to medical school, and he got accepted to Harvard Medical School. He starts going to Harvard Medical School, which is also, both of these schools, Harvard and MIT, if you don't know, are both in Boston, Massachusetts, or thereabouts. So he would go to medical school, and then he would go to MIT and work on his PhD at the same time. I mean, who does that? He's getting a medical degree and a PhD at the same time. I mean, he's got smoke coming out of his ears. The guy is so smart. So when I was a kid growing up in Ohio, my mother was a nurse. And my mother, you know, like I already kind of said, I wanted to be an astronaut since I was 8 years old, but my mother took me aside one day and she said, Mike, what you should do, you should go to MIT and then become a doctor. I don't know where she got that. I understand the doctor part. A lot of mothers, you know, wanted their kids to be doctors, and that's great. I didn't want to be a doctor. I couldn't stand the sight of blood, you know, and even though in my NASA training I've gotten over that. I've actually worked in an emergency room and been trained. I've put five stitches in a guy's finger in an emergency room for training. But anyway, I've gotten over it. But I didn't want to be a doctor. I have no idea where my mother got the MIT part. You know, I don't know why she thought I should go to MIT. Maybe she met a doctor somewhere in her career that had been from MIT. She was impressed. She thought, hey, you know, my son should go to MIT and become a doctor. I don't know. But I can tell you this. My mother's favorite astronaut, at least on STS-129, is Dr. Bobby Satcher, because he went to MIT and became a doctor. Okay, next slide. So this is Nicole Stott. Sorry, Nicole, I selected a picture that looks like you got snot on your nose or something. I didn't notice that before. Anyway, Nicole Stott, you'll see her in the video. I just wanted to show you a picture of her. It was on the space station when we got there. You're going to see her there. And then we brought her home with us. So we were her ride home from space. And so that's Nicole Stott. Let's see, what's next? That's my last slide, right? So we can go to the video now. Can we do that, Mr. Sherman? Awesome. There's our mission patch again. This is the Space Shuttle Atlantis out of the launch pad before we launched. We're getting all suited up here. Hear that applause? Some people will applaud anything, I think. No, they weren't surprised we made it out of the building. This Astro van, I don't know if you can see that. That thing has been taking astronauts to the launch pads for decades. So we rode out in the Astro van. Get to the launch pad. It's a very quiet place. There's nobody around. Nobody wants to be anywhere near this rocket. We're looking for the space shuttle. Here it is, right here. There's our commander. Scorch getting in. This is Butch in the front. That's me in the back there. Leland and Dr. Satcher. Randy Bresnik. His wife was literally 9 months pregnant the day we launched. So
Firing chain is armed. Sound suppression water system activated. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis on a mission to build, resupply, and to do research on the International Space Station.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Pretty wild ride launching our space shuttle. When we lift off, the space shuttle weighs about 3.5 million pounds. Most of that is fuel, but we have 7.5 million pounds of thrust. So when those solid rocket boosters light off, you definitely know you're going somewhere. You just hope it's not Disney World. After about 2 minutes and 10 seconds, these solid rocket boosters come off there. We continue to space on the shuttle's 3 main engines there that you see in the middle. 8.5 minutes later, we are in space. We're going 17,500 miles an hour. Get out the camera, start making our movies here. Everybody's happy to be in space. Somebody's helmet pad was floating here, and we had to fire some thrusters to circularize our orbit. When the thrusters kicked off, that pad comes flying back. Randy makes a nice catch. Leland's down on the middeck getting changed out of his orange suit into some more comfortable clothes. Takes about 6 hours to convert this rocket into a spaceship. There's me, kind of hard to see me underneath a bunch of equipment. Easier to see me here. I like to look good, so get cleaned up. Here's the space station. That's our destination, the International Space Station. Starts out like a bright star. When we can first see it, it looks like a bright star, but as we get closer and closer, it gets bigger and bigger. It's about 2 football fields across. So compared to the space shuttle, it's like the Death Star. This is a great view from the space station of Atlantis. We had 28,000 pounds of cargo back here in the back to deliver. And we did this flip maneuver so the astronauts on the space station could take pictures of all these black tile surface back here, make sure we didn't have any damaged tiles. Now we're coming together with the space station. Both vehicles traveling 17,500 miles an hour, but we want to come together very slowly. I'll let you listen to me.
Get there, get ready. Mark, out the window. Yep, out the window.
What one was when I saw them both?
Ready with the timer?
Ready.
Got that?
Coasting in, coasting in. 18 inches. 9 inches. Ready? 2 inches.
Fire.
It's the initial contact, we got capture.
Capture. Station Houston Atlantis, capture confirmed.
No free drift yet. Still steady light.
So we get docked to the space station, we open the hatch, float inside. There were 6 astronauts and cosmonauts already on the space station, so this was a little mini reunion with a bunch of these people we hadn't seen in a while. Our pilot, Butch, he wanted to give us a tour of the space station. He wanted to record that, so he grabbed one of the space station astronauts with a camera, and he's floating through the Russian end of the space station. This is the Russian laboratory right here. Here are a couple of the compartments attached on the Russian end. Floating forward now, you're going to see where the Russians keep all their junk, right here. This is the airlock where we were getting ready for the first spacewalk. That's a Belgian astronaut. That's Frank de Winne from Belgium. This is the U.S. laboratory that we're in right now, floating forward. This is a Canadian astronaut, Bob Thirsk. To the right, you're going to see that's the European laboratory we call Columbus, and to the left, that's a Japanese laboratory called Kibo, which means hope. And now you'll see come down through this tunnel, we're going to come out on the middeck of Atlantis. Jeff Williams gets a little confused on which way is up. There's our commander. I never see him doing any work. Up to the flight deck, Atlantis. You see all the controls and displays. Everything's powered down right now, but out the window you can see that we're attached to the space station. We did 3 spacewalks on this mission, so we're getting the suits ready for the first spacewalk. Here we are getting in the suits. That's Bobby Satcher on the left. That's me on the right. Butch and Nicole are in the airlock with us. You want to make sure you got a couple people in there to help you get your helmet on nice and tight before you go outside in the vacuum of space until I'm ready to go. We float out the hatch, go outside, beautiful views from outside the space station. I tell the astronauts that stay inside all the time, that the view from inside is pretty good, but when you have that full panoramic view out the helmet, it's amazing. My cuff checklist right there at the top says, Go Navy, beat Army. We got a little football game coming up in a couple weeks. The S-band antenna, I'm unbolting. Bobby Satcher is riding around on a robotic arm. This is a view from Bobby's helmet camera looking down at the space shuttle. And he also had a still camera with him, and I think he set a record because he took 376 still pictures during the spacewalk. Leland and Butch are the ones driving that robotic arm, so they're moving Bobby where he needs to be. They brought him close enough. I handed him this antenna. They moved him over to the space station, and I climbed over to the space station, met him over there. We attached on the outside of the space station there. This is Bobby's reflection. Randy was our quarterback for this first spacewalk, so Randy's inside talking to us, reminding us of our next steps, keeping us on our timeline, giving us our tool settings, things like that. I told you Bobby's an orthopedic surgeon, so we had Bobby do some surgery on a bunch of the robotic arms on the space station. So he's riding around on the largest robotic arm on the space station, and they are taking him to the various other robotic arms so he can perform some maintenance. You see he's got a pretty good view of the Earth going by as they move him from one work site to the next. This is the Japanese robotic arm here. He's pulling out his grease gun, and he said, Mike, as an orthopedic surgeon, I can work on your knee with this same grease gun if you need it. They're watching on this upper left screen, that laptop, they're watching Bobby's helmet camera so they know what he's doing. 2 days later, Randy and I did the second spacewalk of this mission, so we're back in the airlock. Excuse me. Butch and Nicole are back in there helping us get our pants on. Here's one of us outside. They asked Randy and I to move this big antenna from one side of the space station to the other, so right now we are unbolting and unplugging this big antenna here so that we could move it to the other side and plug it back in and make room for this thing called alpha magnetic spectrometer, which is now plugged in right there on space station. Alpha magnetic spectrometer looks for dark matter in space. This is from my helmet camera looking at Randy's suit. There's Randy's safety tether there that he's dealing with. Here, right here in this window, if you can see my laser pointer, somebody's waving to us from inside the space shuttle. And you've heard me talk about spacewalks. Well, you don't really use your legs outside of the space station or the space shuttle. It's all floating and climbing hand over hand. The space station has all these nice handrails on it, so it's like a big monkey bar set that you play on in space for 6.5 or 7 hours. We don't really move this fast. We don't want to fall off. It's 250 miles down. So come back here to the entrance to the airlock, get back inside. Now, this is sort of painful for me to watch. Getting in and out of the suit is the most difficult thing. My crewmates love this scene in the video because they get a chuckle out of what it takes to get me out of my suit. You know, look, Butch is standing on my legs. He's holding my sleeves up, pushing me down and out of the suit. I remind these guys I got big bicep muscles that get caught in the sleeves. Pop out there. I told you Leland was a football player. Oof. It wasn't the hamstring. It was hits like that drove him out of football, I think. So we brought Nicole Stott home. So on our side of this video is the space station crew. They just passed her over to us.
Physical separation.
In the upper right, you can see the space station out the window going up. We're going down.
TCS is good.
Good.
Pedals are clear, I got LBO legs.
Sometimes we kind of play with our food. Leland has squirted some water out of his drink bag into the space there. It makes a sphere floating, and he added some M&Ms. If we had some of those Swedish fish, we could have made a little aquarium, but we didn't have those. Leland, we're getting ready to come home. Leland dropping his checklist there. This is a heads-up display the commander and the pilot see as they're flying back to the Kennedy Space Center. I told you Butch's job, you know, wheels. Put the wheels down, Butch. Ah, there we go. Good job, Butch. 2 buttons. Yeah, took you long enough. So, mission success, Butch. So we're coming back. This is a very long runway at the Kennedy Space Center, and this inset view shows how white hot Atlantis is after that reentry. The runway is 3 miles long, but we would still use this drag chute to help us stop. The space shuttle is a pretty heavy vehicle, was a pretty heavy vehicle, had small wings, so we had to fly about twice as fast on approach as an airliner to create enough lift to fly. So use this drag chute. Get rid of the drag chute at about 70 miles an hour, so when this drag chute comes off, we still got a little bit of braking to do to stop. There's my mission patch again, and this is to remind me who I used to work for. So that's STS-129 in a nutshell. We were in space 11 days. We went around the Earth 171 orbits, traveled about 4.5 million miles. So thank you for that. Now I'm going to tell you my life story. So strap in. You can tell by the gray hair, it's going to take a little while to tell you my story. I always wanted to be an astronaut, though. Since I was 8 years old, growing up in Ohio, I wanted to be an astronaut. Has anybody in here ever heard that there are more astronauts from Ohio than any other state? Probably haven't heard that. Being in Arkansas, you probably don't hear a lot about Ohio, but it's true. For a long time, there were more astronauts from Ohio than any other state, and people would always ask me that, Mike, why so many astronauts from Ohio? And I would just tell them, well, it's just a lot of people looking for work outside the state. That was pretty good. Actually, the truth is that when I was a kid growing up and I was 8 years old, Ohio, coincidentally, already had a couple of astronauts selected from there. John Glenn was from Ohio. Neil Armstrong was from Ohio. Jim Lovell from Apollo 13, if you've ever seen that movie, he was from Ohio. So anytime these guys did anything, early missions, going to space, the news media in Ohio blasted it everywhere, and we heard all about it. As a kid, I remember reading papers, watching TV, hearing about these guys, astronauts. And I thought, that sounds like a cool thing. I wonder what an astronaut is. And I found out astronauts get to go to space and explore. And I said, yeah, that's for me. That's what I want to do. So I got the book the original 7 astronauts had read. And it talked about how they had all become astronauts. And 4 out of the original 7 astronauts in our country had been naval aviators. A naval aviator is a pilot in either the Navy or the Marine Corps. So, you know, in my little 8-year-old mind, I did the math and I said, well, 4 out of 7 are naval aviators. I think I should become a Navy pilot and then become an astronaut. That was my path. That's what I figured would be my path. I told my parents this plan. I said, I'm going to be a pilot, Navy pilot, and then I'm going to be an astronaut. So my dad is the one that said, so if you're thinking about going in the Navy, being a Navy pilot, you should think about this place called the Naval Academy. And I said, well, what's the Naval Academy? And he said, well, it's a college that you go to, and then when you graduate, you become a naval officer, and then, you know, if your eyesight's good and all that other stuff, you can be a Navy pilot. Well, I'd never heard of the Naval Academy. So I asked him some more questions. He said, I'm not going to tell you everything. I want you to do some research on that. So, you know, I went to my computer. I typed in Google. No, I didn't. We didn't have computers. We had the World Book Encyclopedia. So I looked up the World Book Encyclopedia. Believe it or not, had about 3 pages about the United States Naval Academy, and I read that. But that didn't tell me enough, you know, since 1845, producing naval officers. I wanted more detail than that. So I wrote them a letter, and I said, hey, can you send me some information about the Naval Academy? Well, I don't know how many letters they get from 8-year-old kids, but they did the perfect thing. They sent me a book, college catalog, and it had pictures of guys playing every sport imaginable. Every page that I flipped through, now there were a lot of words in there too, but every page had pictures of guys playing football, baseball, swimming, basketball, soccer, golf, sports I'd never heard of like lacrosse, rugby, fencing, you know, rowing crew, things I'd never heard of. But I said, yeah, Dad, this looks awesome. This looks like summer camp. I want to go there, you know. It didn't show a lot of pictures of guys sitting in class all day studying aerospace engineering, which is what I ended up doing probably most of the time there. But I said, yeah, I want to go to the Naval Academy. And my dad was the first one to say, hey, you know, you got to have really good grades to go to the Naval Academy. So I said, I can get good grades. So I buckled down in school. I studied hard. I got good grades. I got good enough grades. I got accepted to go to the Naval Academy. So I got to the Naval Academy, and one of the first things they said was, well, you know, we need you to select a major. What are you going to study here while you're at the Naval Academy? Excuse me. And I said, well, I really like math and science. My uncle is an engineer. I think I'd like to be an engineer. And they said, well, okay, that's great. We have mechanical engineering, systems engineering, ocean engineering, computer engineering, electrical engineering, aerospace engineering. I said, stop. I want to be an astronaut. Aerospace engineering sounds like what I should study. So I studied aerospace engineering. I finished there 4 years, graduated. I asked to go to be a Navy pilot. They said yes. I went off to pilot training, and I started flying airplanes in the Navy. And I love flying airplanes. You know, that was my calling in life, really, was to be a pilot. So I love flying airplanes, but I also had this goal in the back of my mind. I wanted to be a NASA astronaut, right? So I knew also from reading that book early as a kid that NASA really likes to select people that have been test pilots, that are test pilot trained. So after about 3 years of flying in the Navy, I decided, okay, I'm going to apply to the Navy Test Pilot School and become a test pilot. So I sent in an application to the Navy Test Pilot School. I got a call, and they said, hey, congratulations, you've been selected as an alternate to the next test pilot school class. And I said, well, thank you, I guess, but what's an alternate? And they said, well, every class we select a group of pilots to come in to train, but our pilots, our students here, they have to be able to fly airplanes part of the day and go to class part of the day. That's how our test pilot school is set up. So if we select somebody, and in the months before the school starts, a person falls down the steps, breaks a leg maybe, can't fly airplanes for 8 or 12 weeks, what we would do is we would take that selectee, move them back a class, and then call an alternate, bring an alternate in, and the alternate would take this person's place. So you're one of our alternates. Unfortunately for me, nobody fell down the steps. I didn't get called up as an alternate on that class. The good news was that then and today, the Navy Test Pilot School starts a new class every 6 months. Now, the school takes a year, but they overlap, so every 6 months, they take applications for new students. So 6 months later, I applied again. Second time I applied, I didn't hear a thing back, you know, and there's no calling, congratulating me for anything. So I called them and I said, hey, I didn't hear anything, what gives? And they said, well, you weren't selected this time. And I said, well, that's strange because last time I was an alternate. So if I was an alternate, I must have been, you know, I must have made the minimum level for you to select me, because if somebody had fallen down the steps, I would have been in a class. They said, well, yeah, every class is different though, and every class we have a different really group of pilots that we need for that. In your particular set of skills, we didn't need this time around, so you just have to try again. Tried a third time, didn't get in. About the third time I'm applying to test pilot school, I got this call because it was my time to rotate from my duty assignment flying airplanes in Brunswick, Maine, to a shore duty assignment. And this guy calls me up from Washington, D.C., and he says, Mike, I got a slot for you to go to the Navy postgraduate school in Monterey, California, and get a master's degree in aeronautical engineering. And when he first said that, I remember thinking, more college? Wow, college is kind of hard, you know. But he was persistent. He said, Mike, I know that you've been applying to test pilot school a couple times, and you haven't been successful yet. I think that if you have a master's degree, that will make you that much more desirable to the test pilot school and give you an in. So he twisted my arm just enough, and I said, okay. So I went to Monterey, California, and I started working on my master's degree in aeronautical engineering. Well, as soon as I got to Monterey, this was a long time ago, I decided, hey, eventually I need to start applying to NASA. You know, I've applied to test pilot school a couple of times now. I haven't been successful yet, but I need to start applying to NASA. NASA is not just going to come to my door and say, Mike, do you want to be an astronaut? You know, they're going to need an application for me asking to be an astronaut. So I said, I think I'll fill out an application here and send that in. So I sent my first application to NASA about the time I was starting my master's degree. I didn't hear one word back from NASA. You know, I mean, in my mind, I was thinking, well, I didn't expect to hear anything, you know, great and glorious from NASA. My first application, I don't have a master's degree yet. I thought that was sort of an unwritten prerequisite. I wasn't a test pilot yet. I thought, you know, I probably needed to do that first. So I wasn't too upset. And besides, you know, I was getting used to rejection from these Navy test pilot school rejection letters I was getting anyway. So I applied, didn't get in. I kept applying to NASA, to the test pilot school every time I could. I finished my master's degree, graduated. I got that call from that guy in Washington. He said, Mike, I got a ship assignment for you. to go to Norfolk, Virginia and be on the USS Coral Sea CV-43. CV-43 is the hull number. And this was an aircraft carrier. And I remember thinking when he said 43, I said, well, I don't remember hull numbers on our aircraft carriers being that low, that number being that low. You know, right now we have aircraft carriers like the Ronald Reagan, you know, the hull number's like 80. You know, it's a pretty big number. And I thought, wow, but I found out it's a World War II aircraft carrier. It's pretty old. And I was thinking, wow, I didn't really join the Navy to go on ships. You know, I mean, I like flying airplanes, but being a ship's company officer on a ship, that wasn't really in my plans. But I didn't really have a lot of pull because I had just gotten this master's degree. I owed them some time, and I was going where they sent me. So I did that, and it was a career expanding thing because I was getting to fly different airplanes actually. Because even though I was a ship's company officer, they would let me fly on some of the airplanes off the ship every once in a while. So I expanded my resume a little bit. And I kept applying to test pilot school. You know, and I applied to test pilot 5, 6, 7 times, you know, and I still wasn't getting into test pilot school. Believe it or not, the 8th time, I'd been on the ship now about 2 years. I was ready to get off that ship. About 2.5 years, I applied. I got accepted to the Navy test pilot school on the 8th try. So I left the ship. I went to Patuxent River, Maryland, and I went through test pilot school. And if you like flying airplanes, you love being a test pilot because test pilots get to fly all different kinds of airplanes. But the one thing they didn't tell me about, hey, you fly planes half the day, you go to school half the day. They didn't tell me the part about then you write reports, and writing reports takes you all night until the next day. So they give you a lot of work there. But anyway, for a year, I went through that school, graduated, went off, and became a test pilot for the Navy. 10 months as a test pilot, I got this call back from the test pilot school. And they said, Mike, we have an opening here for a flight instructor at the Navy test pilot school. And I said, wait, you know you're calling the guy that applied. You turned me down 7 times to your test pilot school. I've been a test pilot for 10 months, you know. You would think you would want a little more seasoned guy as your instructor. And they said, no, we really would like you because you have the right personality to be an instructor. You did well here as a student. We think you would be a good instructor. So I went back over there. Second best job I ever had in my life was being a test pilot school instructor because I could be flying gliders in the morning and I could be flying an F-18 fighter jet in the afternoon as an instructor at the test pilot school. It was just amazing. We had probably 15, 16 different types of aircraft and helicopters. And, you know, I was like a kid in a candy store. I loved it. And I got to go back because, you know, in this video that you just watched, 2 of my students, when I was a test pilot school instructor, were Charlie Hobaugh, my commander, and Butch Wilmore, my pilot. So I always tell the teachers in the room, hey, you got to treat all your students like you would like to be treated because, you know, you never know when they might be your bosses someday. You know, they might grow up and be the district superintendent. They might take Dr. Rollins' spot. Not anytime soon, though. But anyway, so I loved that job. It was a great job. But, you know, I really wanted to be an astronaut. I kept applying to NASA. I applied to NASA. The problem with NASA is at that time you could only apply every 2 years or so. So every time the cycle would come around, I would throw an application in. Second time, third time, fourth time, you know, I'm not hearing anything. 5th time now, I'm you know, a test pilot school and test pilot school instructor, not hearing anything back. Some of my friends now are getting selected as astronauts, people that I've gone to grad school with or test pilot school with. I'm not getting the call. Then it's time for me to rotate job assignments again. This guy calls and says, Mike, I got a slot for you to go to Washington, D.C., got a desk all picked out for you. And I said, oh no, this is the end of my hopes to become an astronaut because they're not going to select a guy that's sitting at a desk in Washington. They want somebody that's adding to his resume, flight hours, you know, more airplanes, more experiences like that. I went to Washington. Lo and behold, the 7th time I applied to NASA, I was sitting in a meeting in Washington, D.C., and Teresa Gomez called me from the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, said, Mike, I've got your application here. We'd like to bring you down for an astronaut interview. I said, Teresa, I'll be there in 20 minutes. You know, I've been waiting for this call since I was 8 years old. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I went down there. Astronaut interview takes about a week because, excuse me, NASA wants to make sure that you're 100% healthy. So it takes a week to give you every possible medical test that they can think of. And then for 45 minutes or so during that week, I actually put on a suit and tie, I went into this room, and I had my very first job interview ever in my life, okay? There were 12 people in there to interview me, so it was a little bit daunting, you know, to have 12 people for your very first job interview. And I say it was my first job interview because, hey, I had jobs before. As a kid growing up in Wadsworth, Ohio, I bussed tables in a restaurant, I delivered newspapers, I even painted bridges for the local county. These are all jobs. The most important thing when you fill out that job application is your phone number. If they need you, they will call you and hire you. You know, there's no job interview. Hey, would you be a good bus boy? Hey, you know, we're gonna just hire you and we'll see how it works out. I went to the Naval Academy. If you go to a service academy, there is no job interview at the end of your 4 years at a service academy. At the end of your 4 years, if you're still there, they hand you a set of orders and you're off to your first duty assignment. So there's no job interview. So my very first job interview ever was with 12 people asking me questions. So I sat down. They started asking me questions about me. I was a little intimidated at first, but when they started asking me questions about me, I thought, well, I know more about me than anybody else in this room, so I can answer questions about me. And some of the questions were kind of tough, like Brian Duffy, another former shuttle astronaut. He's an Air Force guy, and he said, Mike, why'd you go to the Naval Academy? Why didn't you go to the Air Force Academy? Well, how do you answer, you know, a question? Well, how do you diplomatically say, why would anybody go to the Air Force Academy if they could go to the Naval Academy? You know, so I don't know, tough questions. Anyway, waited 9 months from the time I interviewed. This was sometime October of 1995 till about June of 1996, before they made their selections, April 1996, I remember. And they called me and said, Mike, sorry, we got a great group of people, but you're not one of them. We enjoyed meeting you, and good luck. I said, well, man, bummer. I had to wait 2 years. I applied again. 2 years later, 1997 now, got the call back, go back to Houston for the same process. I got down there, and I said, hey, I shouldn't have to do all these medical tests again. I just did all the medical tests 2 years ago. You probably have all the results right there. They said, no, you got to do all the medical tests again. Even the proctologist, Dr. Rollins, was telling me, you got to do that again. A little inside joke between the two of us that know proctologists. Anyway, went through all that, went into that same room, you know, same exact room, some of the same 12 people, except instead of John Young chairing the panel the second time around, John Young was an astronaut on Gemini, Apollo, Space Shuttle. He was a living legend, still is, and he was the chair of that first time I went down there. This time the chair was Bob Cabana, another former astronaut. He is now the head of the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. And the toughest question on my second time around was Bob looked at me and said, Mike, we didn't pick you 2 years ago. Why should we pick you this time? I'm like, whoa, man, this is only my second job interview in my life, you know. I mean, can we save the tough questions like that for next time? But I said something like, well, you know, I would have liked to say, maybe I'm here to help you, make up for the mistake you made 2 years ago and give you an opportunity to select me. But I didn't say that. You know, I might sound like a jokester, but I'm not that big a jokester. Not crazy. So anyway, I said something like, well, I hope that you can find a reason, you know, to select me. And they did. So I got the call, and I did get selected. On my 8th try to NASA, I got selected, and I went to NASA in 1998, joined Leland Melvin, you know, who went through that process all of one time. You know, I hate Leland. So, you know, all that rejection, you know, you forget about. The first time I launched on a space shuttle, boy, you know, it was all worth it. Forget about all the times I had to pick myself back up and dust myself off and try again, you know. And I tell people all the time, I said, hey, I hope that, you know, you guys are setting goals. You have dreams. You know, a goal is just a dream with a date. You know, you're setting goals for yourselves. I hope that it's not taking you 8 times to achieve your goals. You know, but I'm hoping also that if you don't achieve a goal the first time, second time, and this is something you really want to do, because I really wanted to do this, and I had that conversation with myself many times during those rejection calls about, is this something that is this really worth it, you know, because getting all these rejections, you know, is it worth going through this process again? I always thought, yeah, it really is, because this is what I really, really want to do. So I hope that you're doing that and you're picking yourself back up if there's a goal that you want and you don't achieve it. I would also say that if you are achieving every goal that you set for yourself the very first time, you are not setting the goal quite high enough. You're not making it quite tough enough on yourself. So make those goals a little bit tougher on yourselves and I got to wander back over here. 5 minutes? Good. Perfect. Yes, my phone keeps going to sleep. Okay, yeah, so I should put that McDonald's prop down. Let some of the video should be without, me schlepping a product in front of you or something. But anyway, I'm not getting paid by McDonald's. I gotta, So I want to say one other thing is that, when I went to NASA, I did not know this really, that they were looking at things like, they asked me about my hobbies, and I told them, one of my hobbies as a kid and still to this day is working with wood. My father was an attorney, but he would come home at night and on weekends, and he liked to work down in the basement. He had a wood shop, and I would go down there, and for a long time, I was just sort of his tool holder, I would get to hand him tools, and I'd get to watch him doing carpentry and woodwork, and I enjoyed that to the point that, when he passed away, I inherited all his tools, and now I have them all in my garage, and I do that kind of stuff too, and I enjoy that very much. Well, that came out in my interviews, and I found out much later that NASA actually likes people that have technical backgrounds. Astronauts have to have a technical degree, but they also like the fact that, I had a hobby, a skill, if you will. I wouldn't call it quite a skill for me, but I do woodworking. I'm just not skilled at it. That you work with your hands. You can do things with your hands. You're just not all, slide rule and calculating things, as an engineer. You're actually able to do things with your hands. So I recommend that to everybody, is pick up a skill. If you're planning to go to college, great. Pick up a skill. Aside from, book learning and all that kind of stuff, have something else that you can do, you can point to, and work on your car, work on woodworking, learn to sew, learn to knit, do something like that, because those are great things to kind of make you a more well-rounded person, okay? That's what makes you happier in life. The more well-rounded the person you are, the better your life becomes and is, I think. And I'll flip it around and I'll say, hey, because I know everybody is not planning to go to college. Some of you, are planning to apply, your skills in trades and become a plumber or a carpenter or something like that. Hey, same thing true for you, Pick up another skill, read, do other things to make yourself, more than just a one-dimensional person. A one-dimensional person just goes off to his plumber job or just goes off to his engineer job and just does that and then just goes home at night, does nothing else, Be a well-rounded person. Think of things that you like to do. Pick up a sport that you can play throughout your life. We can't all play high school football for our entire lives because, we get old and we can't do that anymore. They don't let us on the football field anymore. Leland, me, anybody. But, golf, things like that, run, sports that you can continue to participate in throughout your lives, make you a more well-rounded and a happier individual overall. And so, is that a good ending point? I'm looking. Are we good? How are we doing on time? I don't want to keep these guys away from class. Well, thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate your chuckles. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Captain Foreman, for that inspiring conversation about persistence and perseverance and sticking to get denied that many times. I want to recognize our superintendent of schools, Dr. Jim Rollins. Dr. Rollins, would you please stand? Would y'all thank him? Students, I want to thank you again for your assistance last night, but I also want to thank you for your attentiveness today. And there are lessons to learn from others, and we had a great opportunity to do that today. What we're going to do the rest of the morning is advisors, collect your flocks. If you came in the side door, go out the side door. If you came in through the lobby, please go out through the lobby. At this time, you're dismissed to go to your advisory class.